Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form webinar about Dubai World Cup night and the undercard. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you for the next 45 minutes. Super excited to be joined by two expert form analysts to help pick our way through this card and hopefully find some bets for this exciting, what will be a morning of racing here in the United States. First up, I want to introduce DRF's international correspondent. He is coming to us live from Dubai, despite some dodgy hotel Wi-Fi issues. He, of course, is Marcus Hersh. Marcus, how are you today?
I'm fine. Just to clarify, I am the co-international correspondent with the able-bodied Steve Anderson. I don't want Steve to feel neglected because he is an expert. I'm great, and thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. I think I finally have it all figured out. It took a few days, but now I'm there.
I like it. I like it. We are also joined by another international correspondent, this one from Timeform. He's Mark Milligan. Mark, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, and hoping we can put a bit of flesh on the bones of some of the European horses and some of the locals for our listeners and watchers this afternoon or this morning, wherever they may be. Excellent.
This broadcast will also be archived. You can find it at drf.com/YouTube. Few hours after this live broadcast finishes, if folks want to go back and take notes, etc., or if you miss something along the way. Without further ado, let's dive in. We're going to look at every race on the card with the exception of the Arabian race. Unless, Marcus, you have a strong fancy in the Arabian race, we could pause for that.
I have a strong fancy in not talking about it.
So let's go right to the Godolphin Mile. And Marcus, we're going to start off with you. What were your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's maybe the weakest $1 million race in thoroughbred history. Is that a fair guess, maybe? I mean, it's just not, it's not especially compelling. It's hard to understand why there's only one American runner and he's staying here, economic model, and coming home. I mean, I think what happened was everyone thought Sharp Azteca was running and he was going to be a 500-pound gorilla. And so they're like, no. I mean, that's why you don't duck one horse. So, I mean, we've got some Japanese horses, some locals, and economic model, an Andre Fabre horse. It's a real mishmash. I mean, the prep for the race was run over a speed bias track, the one on the 10th. Heavy Metal was favored there. He coughed it up. And Kim Bear, who was passed at the top of the stretch, switched out to the 2-path. Kim got him, ran pretty decently. Kim Bear's got an outside draw. I mean, I wouldn't take a short price on Kim Bear, nor would I be that enthused about economic model, betting into the North American tote. He's going to get more action than he probably deserves, even though I think he has a chance. Looks like there's plenty of pace in the race. I mean, it's the first race on the card, so as much as anything, it's going to be a bellwether for us to see how the dirt is riding. I mean, to see if there's going to be a strong inside speed favoring character to the surface, as was the case on Super Saturday on the 10th. If that is, whoever gets to the front of the rail is going to have a big advantage. But I'm hoping that it's somewhat fair, and I'm going to make a little bet on Musa Watt. If he's going to be a fair price, especially in America. I think he'll probably be 20-1, 18-1. This horse has been he's 4. He's run 3 times on dirt after coming here this winter, and he travels really well in there. He's impressed me just with the way he goes, and he's done something that few horses have done on many of the cards here, and that's be able to make up ground. And that includes in the Verge Nahar on the 10th, where he was really the only horse closing much at all. He came from quite a few lengths off the pace, and I thought looked fairly decent doing it. It looks like he might be kind of progressive, and I'm going to take my shot with Musa Watt.
I like it, 15-1 on the morning line. Mark, before we get into your thoughts specifically on this race, I'd love to hear a comment from you about the speed bias that Marcus was describing. Seems like all winter races have gone to front runners on the rail. My friend Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today, produced a stat that 58% of races on the dirt had been won in that fashion. Do you think these are conditions we're going to see for World Cup night as we have throughout the meeting?
Well, first, I would hope not, but the history of the meeting so far, the past couple of months, tells us that the track is unlikely to change drastically. Now, if we think back 12 months ago, we had a deluge, didn't we, before the meeting, which made the track very, very wet and tended to favour outside closers to a certain degree. Now, I'm sure Marcus will concur that we're unlikely to see that kind of weather this year. And by all accounts, the track has not been prepared any differently for this meeting. So it could well be that the very strong inside speed bias that we have seen for practically the entire carnival prevails. And if so, that's going to make things very, very tricky for some fancied horses throughout the evening, really, because a lot of the fancied horses are drawn wider than ideal if the bias prevails.
And who do you think is going to have the tactical advantage in the Godolphin Mile?
Well, although strictly on form, he can't win the race, Capizano has drawn the plum draw in one if Mike Smith can get him out of there. Now, I think you have to write off his Mactoum Challenge race last time because Capizano simply does not stay 1.25 miles. Now, this is a horse who was with Charlie Appleby a couple of years ago, and they held out high hopes for him. And he had some problems. He refused to settle over longer trips. He came back and ran a mile for the disgraced Salim bin Gadaya in a handicap in February. Ran very well. And though that form is 1,000,000 miles away from what you'd need to win this race, it could well be, if a bias prevails, Capizano can go very well from the inside. Of course, the elephant in the room with Capizano and stable companion Heavy Metal is the fact that their trainer Salim bin Gadaya has now been banned for drug infringements, and they've been turned over to Sandeep Jadaf, who was Salim bin Gadaya's assistant trainer, and it remains to be seen if those two horses will perform at the same level.
If I hold your feet to the fire to make a selection for this one, who would it be?
Yeah, I think having not seen the track, and we're going to need this race, aren't we, really, to sort of size things up, I'd probably be willing to take a shot at Capizano from the inside at around 20-25 to 1, and then we can see if Capizano runs well for a long, long way. I think we'll know that bias is holding.
That sounds like, as Marcus said, going to be an excellent bellwether for that. Let's move on to the Dubai Gold Cup. We're going 2 miles on the turf. Marcus, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think the favorite will take a no end of beating. Wazirabad, he's won the race 2 times in a row, and this has been the target for him probably since he finished his 2017 campaign. He came here like he did last year and had a practice race on the 10th at a distance too short, a race strictly meant to move him forward. Into this race, he's only 6. I mean, he's been around for a while. He's a stayer who got good relatively early in his career for horses that can run 2 miles. So he's not, I mean, he's raced 20 times. His record is just outstanding. He doesn't, go to races and run against Order of St. George and stuff like that. But in France, and especially at Meydan, he's a very, very, powerful horse with a great kick who seems to deliver all the time. I haven't seen anything to indicate that he wouldn't be on form in this race. And I think he'll reverse the decision with Rare Rhythm and beat him in the Nad Al Shiva Trophy. Big Orange, you draw a line through the British Champions Long Distance Cup, and this is a horse that needs to stand at the top of the ground, and that was the bottom of the ground there. And the rain that came last year for the World Cup card also disadvantaged him, although he ran decently. He was better 2 years ago on good going. It's a little bit of an issue early in the week. On Monday, happened to actually be at the training track where he does all his preparation during the week leading up to the race. And he's been here twice. He's been all over the world. And he acted like a horse who'd never been out of his own yard. He just stood there and wouldn't move. And it wasn't until the outrider came, on his pony and coddled him along that he would canter just around to the front side. And that's fine. I didn't think much of it. And then it turned out he had gone back to the barn and tied up, which is like having a giant muscle cramp. It's like an electrolyte imbalance or some such. And that's not good. And so he didn't train the next day. That was Tuesday. He did train Wednesday. Didn't train today, but that was by design. They thought he was good yesterday. He's probably over that, but not ideal. I don't know that he can beat Vazirabad even if he runs his best. And then I guess another horse I think was worth mentioning is the progressive Torcedor. I think he's a horse that you could back if you thought he was ready, but he's making his first run since Ascot. And I mean, Mark will know more about this than I do. I get the feeling he acts on different surfaces, but he might prefer it's a little bit softer that he's going to get here. But he's a good horse who could have a really good year this year. But for me, I'm siding with the two-time winner Vazirabad. Not very interesting.
Logical though. Mark, where are you here?
Yeah, just touching on Torcedor. I think Torcedor does handle soft conditions very well. I don't think he's completely ground dependent though. We never see rattling fast ground on the Dubai Turf. I think he'll be fine. The horse I was quite interested in this particular race was Dal Harold, who's trained by William Haggis. Now he's a horse who's worked his way up through the handicap ranks in the UK, and William Haggis is a trainer who doesn't overface his horses when they're young. And he's quite happy for them to work their way up through the ranks. He kept some good company last year, having graduated from handicaps, and he looked better than ever, winning a conditions race at Chelmsford last time by 10 lengths from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now that form, on the face of it, wouldn't be good enough to win this, but that was his first run since August. He'll come on a long way for it. He doesn't have much to find on Timeform ratings, and he's got Ryan Moore on board and a good draw in one. I'd be prepared to go with Dal Harold as a new face in here.
All right, let's move on to the UAE Derby. I'm going to go with the Derby pronunciation rather than Derby, given the theoretical goal for these horses. We're looking at 1 mile and 3/16 on the dirt. A very interesting field in terms of horses picked from here and there. Mark, let's keep it with you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is, for me, this is one of the races of the evening, actually, with Mendelssohn taking on Gold Star. And Gold Town has arguably been the star of the whole carnival so far. He was pretty nondescript on turf back in the UK last year. And Charlie Appleby is on record as saying this horse, the first time they worked him on dirt, he just looked like a completely different horse. And being by street cry, you would expect him to flourish on the dirt. The way he travels, he's got tactical speed, and his UAE 2000 Guineas win was so impressive last time by over 10 lengths from Gotti. It has to be said, the dirt 3-year-olds in the UAE this season are not the best bunch, but you couldn't have been more impressed with Gold Town. He recorded a decent speed figure last time in winning that race. Of course, Mendelssohn has got a pedigree to die for, hasn't he, when it comes to dirt? And this will be his first outing on a dirt surface. I would expect he will handle it, no bother at all. These two going head to head, one of the highlights of the evening for me. But you've also got to throw in Rhea, who has shown lots and lots of speed, and she's drawn inside. Whether she's quite good enough on a fair track to beat the two from Godolphin and Coolmore would be debatable, but she's certainly drawn well to attack. And Yulong Warrior was very impressive, winning the Albastikaya on Super Saturday, although he took advantage of that inside bias. This is an absolute cracker for me, but I've been so impressed by Gold Town throughout the entire carnival that I would have to be sticking with him.
Marcus, what's your perspective on this one?
Let me ask you, Mark, do you think Gold Town can be rated off the pace? Or, I mean, he's obviously gone forward in his last two, and he also led in his last start in England. I don't know. I don't know. I wonder about that, if he's going to be, if he's going to relax, if they want to go flying out of there. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, he's got lots and lots of tactical speed, but I don't think he's ever over-raced. And he's just simply been too quick for his opposition. I think we are going to see Raya go forward, aren't we? And he's probably going to have to sit a stalking trip, and that will be the crux of the matter, won't it? Whether he can sit a stalking trip and still find over this longer distance.
My concern is that Yulong Warrior is going to come flying out of there to his outside too, and really want to get to the front because how effective that was for him last time. And I'm worried that it could stoke Gold Town up too. I mean, we'll see how the track is playing, but there's every chance that this race could end up being really fast early. Now, whether that means that they come back to the horses, you know, that remains to be seen. But I mean, Mendelssohn could end up working out a pretty good trip if he doesn't mind eating some dirt sitting inside, and that's a big if. But he has displayed a lot of different sorts of characteristics in what he's done so far. He came through on the inside last time on the all-weather at Dundalk. Yeah, and I mean, you'd have to rate his Dewhurst and Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf as far as the competition far above anything Gold Town and Raya meant here. And I mean, I would probably side with him narrowly. I think we should also probably talk about Re-Ride, the American horse who came here for Steve Asmussen. His assistant trainer Scott Blasi traveled with him, and I know he's shipped well and done fine. He's traveling the classic Delta down Sunland Park Meydan route, a route no horse in history has ever taken. But that's kind of, you know, besides the point, you know, because, you know, his Kentucky Jockey Club, which has become like the key race of all key races, everything out of there is winning. He didn't run quite as bad as it looks. He got the dreaded between trip, and he's not a big horse. I think he got a little intimidated around the far turn and kind of sucked out of there. Probably is a better horse now than that, and he was definitely flattered when the horse he trounced in the Mind That Bird Derby at Sunland Park Runway Ghost came back to win the big purse down there in the Sunland Derby itself. And I think what's good about him is being an American who's been behind on dirt before. He's probably going to tolerate kickback better than, you know, horses that have run on grass, or even a lot of these Dubai horses that, you know, they go to the one reason speed is so effective here is because both horse and jockey tend to not want to get sprayed with a considerable kickback on this dirt surface. So while, I mean, I don't know if Mendelssohn will sit in behind, take dirt and finish, I suspect he might. I'm pretty sure Re-Ride would be capable of doing that. He'll be several times the price of Mendelssohn, something to consider.
Yeah, the 12s looks too big to me, especially in situations where you can get the quarter of the odds each way for our listeners over in England. I wouldn't. Reasonable thought.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see in the USA pools if he ends up getting halved in price, or if people will sort of follow the market, given all the understandable hype surrounding Gold Town and, of course, Mendelssohn. A very interesting betting race.
Yeah,
very interesting race in general.
I think Re-Ride will be fair priced, actually, in America. I don't think he has a massive following, and I don't think people take him that seriously.
All right, let's move on to the Alquaz Sprint. Marcus, we'll keep it with you for this one. Hot favorite here in Blue Point. Is he the one, or did you go in another direction?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he's really good. I think he's going to run well, and he's probably, you know, he's the most likely winner. You want to be being drawn on the far outside in these straight course sprints at Meydan is a good thing. You want to get up over the crown of the track if possible. People with live chances would want to gravitate that direction anyway, so he's already going to be there. I was really taken with the way he ran in the Meydan Sprint, his only race this winter. He was beaten, but he was beaten by, just a monster at 5'8" on this surface, Erdőjal, who was unfortunately out of this race with a stress fracture that was recently incurred. But I mean, there's no shame in losing by a head to Erdőjal, and he was really chopping down his lead in the final stride. That being said, I mean, Jungle Cat is older and more exposed than Blue Point, but I think that he's a better horse now than he's ever been. His race around a bend going 1,400 meters, Al Fahidi Fort, I thought it was very visually impressive, and Janubi has come back to run well out of there. And then he was even better going down the straightaway in the prep for this. I mean, I don't think he necessarily has to be over the top at all. He could at least come back to that last race, and he's going to be a much more appealing number than Blue Point in the win pool. And Peter Miller rates Conquest Tsunami as easily. He didn't hesitate in saying that was his best chance among the three horses that he has in this race. Stormy Liberal and Richard's Boy being the other two. And I mean, I think that everything points to that as well. Erdőjal coming out is a great boon to his chances, because he is definitely a front runner, and they're not going to try to take anything away from him. He's going to go forward, try to lead, and hope to have something left at the end. And I'm not going to be shocked if he's competitive in this race.
We saw an American horse almost win this at 100-1 in the UK.
Long on value.
Exactly. So that does make sense. Mark, where did you land in the Alcoz?
Yeah, obviously Blue Point is going to take a world of beating, and Marcus has already touched on the Meydan sprint when he was gaining hand over fist on Erdőjal at the end over 5 furlongs. I thought Librisa Breeze was quite interesting in here. He's another high-class individual. He's coming off a win in the Champions Sprint at Ascot in October. I don't think he'll lack for fitness. He's probably on good or faster ground, he's probably a little bit better at 7 furlongs these days. He did get up over 6 furlongs last time on soft ground. If they go quick enough, he'll be finishing. And for me, I thought he was probably the each way bet in here. But Blue Point will take a world of beating. He knocked heads with some of the best sprinters in Europe last season in the shape of Harry Angel and Caravaggio. And the prospect of more to come. The only thing you can't stomach about Blue Point is the short price, really. So I thought at a bigger price, I'd probably take a shot with Librisa Breeze.
All right, we're on dirt next in the Golden Shaheen. Mark, I know you had mentioned you had a future wager on Roy H. I'd like to know how you're feeling about that and what your thoughts are.
I'd like to know what the price was.
Yeah, because Marcus wasn't privy to our conversation beforehand, was he? Back in early February, the bookmakers over here kindly granted me 16-1 on a Roy H. West Coast double.
No, they did. No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. Roy H.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. But I mean, obviously, who knows what's going to happen? But just as a proposition, that is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah,
getting all the value. Whatever happens, you're getting all the
Roy H. has flown under the radar in this country. I think it's taken a lot of people who watch American racing in the UK a while to cotton on to exactly how talented this horse is. And he was somewhat underestimated by the British bookmakers over here. As I say, even around about a couple of months ago, the price has tightened now to the price he should be. But I have to say, everything I saw on Super Saturday from the dirt track didn't exactly fill me with confidence for this wager. Now, obviously, if the track plays towards front end speed, XY Jet is going to be in pole position from his draw in stall 2. He is going to get pressure though. Although Jordan Sport is drawn wide in 9, this is one of the fastest horses early that you'll see around Meydan, and I would say he's probably capable of going the early fractions with XY Jet. And my hope is if we get a fair track that they'll knock heads and set it up for the likes of Roy H. and Mind Your Biscuits to come from further back. And we mustn't discount from the pace scenario My Catch as well, who's another very fast horse drawn just inside Jordan Sport. So there looks to be plenty of speed here on paper, and on a fair track, you'd think it sets up well for Roy H. But again, we keep going back to it, don't we? The key is how the track plays.
Marcus, do you see this as a 2-horse race, or any more complexity for you?
Just to follow up on what Mark was just saying, I would look at, I think Roy H., even if there is a bias, I still think he'll win, because he does have plenty of speed. It's just that he will relax, especially for this rider. He can stay right up on the back of the pace. And, when we've seen these biases, there hasn't been a horse of this quality. I guess you could say Thunder Snow would have been closer to North America in Maktoum Challenge and March, things like that. But this horse is so much better than the average horse that would be chasing on the outside. I would think that he could win even if the track is playing to forward horses. My take is going to be that I think XY Jet will maybe outrun Jordan Sport just a little bit. And even if he doesn't, I think he'll shrug him off at some point. I'm against Mind Your Biscuits this time around. I just don't think that he's the same horse as he was a year ago. And so, I think Roy H is going to win, and I'm going to see what an exacta would be paying with XY Jet underneath him. Hopefully something kind of fair.
Keeping it simple, that makes sense. Maybe the presence of Mind Your Biscuits and the sort of unknown.
That's my hope, exactly.
And also the unknown nature of some of the horses. Maybe that causes people to use too many combinations, and you end up getting a whiff of value on the obvious. It's absolutely worth taking a look and a sensible plan. Let's go on to the Group 1 Dubai Turf. Marcus, some very familiar names in here. Are you landing with one of them, or are you going to be getting creative?
I'm probably not going to get too creative. It's just not the most compelling renewal of this race, and I can't get too deep into it. The ones I would be choosing from would be 2 of the Japanese horses. Well, maybe even 3. I think Neorealism, he ran so badly in the Tenno show. It's probably a good thing, because he didn't stretch himself too much on that really demanding track. They went 1.25 miles in 2:08 and change, if you want to know how laboring that course was. And outside of that, and then he comes back in the Hong Kong Cup, where no one had a chance that night against Time Warp, when he just waltzed along in the clear and on the lead. And Neorealism finished really fast to get 3rd in that race behind another excellent horse in Werther. Ben Battle, I think the price that was in Hong Kong. He's taking a lot of money. Ben Battle is going to be the favorite, I would imagine. And you can't really hold his Jebel Hada last time against him. He was so wide in that race. It's kind of shocking how wide he was around the entire turn, and then pushed even wider into the stretch. I thought he was pretty brave to outfinish Janubi, considering what kind of ground loss he suffered. But at the same time, he was so sharp in his 2 earlier runs this winter. And then even though he lost, you'd have to think that was a similarly taxing race. And I always wonder about horses that are making their 4th start of the carnival after running big races earlier. This is meant to be a good horse. He was probably Godolphin's best middle distance 3-year-old hope, early in the year last year. And so he's capable of running back to his recent form, but like I said, really going to get hammered. I think in the betting, probably below fair value. Janubi ran really big last time. I don't think he really wants the distance. Bivlos, I came here skeptical of. She benefited from the rain that turned the course kind of soft last year, but she's using the same pattern that got her into the winner's circle last year, comes out of the same race, and she's made a pretty favorable, physical impression for whatever that's worth. And if you like Vivlos, Cosmia has comparable recent form. They ran right next to each other last October. She hasn't traveled in the same way, but she's going to be a much bigger price. And good old Lancaster Bomber, who should really just move his career to the United States and be done with it. He runs big races every time he's there. He's not proven over the 1,800 meters, about 1.1 1/8, but he might be okay at it. He doesn't have a big turn of foot. He's a grinding type. He's almost certainly going to go forward from 12 to get early position. And if the pace is moderate and he can open an advantage at some point, he could be in the top 4.
It's an open race. You can hear just from Marcus's description. Mark, where do you see the needle landing?
Yeah, it is a very open race. I would concur with that. If we just take a quick sweep through our weight-adjusted Timeform ratings, which I've got in front of me now, we've got literally just £3 or 3 points separating around 7 or 8 of these horses. There really isn't a great deal between them in terms of ability. I kind of wanted to be against Ben Battle. For me, he's still got a bit to prove at this level. Yes, he was one of Godolphin's great white hopes at the start of last year, and he ran a decent 5th in our Epsom Derby, but then he kind of had to go back down in class to get his career back on track. I think even with a wide trip, he should have won the Jebel Hatter last time, and he didn't. And I just think he may find one of the Japanese contingent a little bit too strong here. I was unsure really as to which one I would land on, but I think I would just favour neorealism. And I know it's often folly to go against Godolphin at the Dubai Carnival, but my stance here was to just try and play against Ben Battle, really.
Yes, mirrors exactly the way that I've thought about this race too, and landing on the same Japanese horse, and although I do think they're pretty tightly grouped too.
But sometimes that in a race that appears so open, when you have a favorite, even if it's not going to be a short favorite, you can find enough equity wading into the pools if you're willing to oppose that one. And then, of course, it's frustrating when they sometimes run to those shorter odds, but it's just something that you have to deal with in the never-ending search for value that we face as horse players.
You did the right thing, even though you got smacked.
Exactly. That's something. If you want to play this game, whether you're playing it in the UK or you're playing it in the USA or you're playing it in Dubai, that's just, if you can't live with those type of beats, you're probably in the wrong game, wouldn't you say, Marcus?
I'm living with him all the time, Pete.
All right, we've got just over 10 minutes left, 12 minutes to be exact. We've got 2 races left to talk about. Hopefully we can get to a reader question or 2. Next up is the Shima Classic. Mark, we're going to start with you on this one. Is this Cloth of Stars race to lose?
Yeah, I think it is, certainly from a form perspective. If you take Cloth of Stars second to Enable in the Arc at Chantilly last October, that essentially in form terms towers above anything that the rest of this field have achieved. The problem you encounter with Cloth of Stars is that strictly in ratings terms, that was quite a way ahead of anything he'd achieved previously. Now, it could just be we were getting on towards the end of the year and he was just becoming a better horse. But I would want to see him, I think I'd want to see him replicate that before going in at a short price. I don't think the horse is the most straightforward either, Cloth of Stars. I think he's what we'd say is probably a bit of a character. Cloth of Stars.
He acts up bad.
So
he acts up.
yeah, I've been reading the reports from Dubai saying that he's been a bit of a lad during morning training, and I think they're going to have to keep a lid on his exuberance somewhat. So I don't know what sort of price he'll go off in the US pools, but over here he's trading quite a short price favourite at around 5-2, and for me, I think there was enough doubt there to not want to get involved at that sort of price. I thought Ray Dioro, another Japanese horse, was particularly interesting. He's relatively lightly raced. He's definitely going to improve, I think, from his run last time. He was an interesting one for me. And I know I work quite closely with someone who deals with Ryan Moore. I know Ryan Moore is very keen on Idaho in this particular spot as well. They think that this could well be Idaho's year. And he kind of disappointed after he'd ran at Ascot in the summer. And I think more was expected of him as they went into the latter half of the year. And it could be that he's just a better horse in the first half of the year. So I know Ryan Moore's expecting a big run from Idaho. For me, I think I would land on Ray Dioro in this spot.
It's interesting to look at some of the horses with good Ascot form, just because I would imagine that ground, which was firm USA-like, you could see a world in which it translates well to the kind of turf they're going to be running on Saturday. So that's a little bit of an interesting shout there for Idaho, maybe for some USA exotics type players. There will be an exacta, a trifecta, and an omni on this race, maybe as one to throw in. Marcus, what do you make of this one?
Well, I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Ray Dioro is probably the horse I'm most looking forward to betting on the night. I hope he's 9-2 to 5-1 in America. I urge anyone paying attention to this to go back and watch his Japanese Derby. It's a tremendous performance. He's got nothing but upside. His work here was spectacular. Christophe Lemaire knows him well, knows what he has to do to get the horse to come back into his hands. I think he's going to run a great race and win.
Very cool. Let me just ask you one more quick thing about Cloth of Stars. You mentioned these antics in the morning, Marcus. Is this how he typically behaves, or has he been worse than usual from what you understand?
Well, people say that he does this sort of stuff all the time. I mean, that's fine. I don't know the horse. I don't see him every day. And he's been on dirt all the time too, which is not his thing. Listen, I bet on this horse twice last year. I bet him beneath a navel in the exacta in the ARP, and I also liked him early in the year when he wasn't. He ended up being no price. I thought he'd win the Pre-Canadian, but I have serious questions about the races he's won. That narrowly won, I just don't think he's beaten any really good horses. I know that his ratings are decent, and he does have okay form over firm ground, but his very best races have been on soft. At a short price, I just don't think he's that kind of horse. He'll prove me wrong, I'm sure, but the other horse has far more upside, and I think might already be better.
All right, good stuff. One of the horses who boosted that Cloth of Stars form is a good way to tilt our conversation into the Dubai World Cup, and that's Talismanic, who from the Chantilly race gave him a boost at the Breeders' Cup turf. Talismanic trying dirt, but it sure seems like the Dubai World Cup, bias or no bias, you've got to take a long look at West Coast here. Marcus, is he your selection, or do you have another approach?
Well, I mean, I'd like to be against him, but he's just so much better than anybody else right now. And I came being interested in Talismanic, but he's getting over the dirt okay, but he just hasn't been. The pace is going to be so much faster than anything he's done, and he's just not. I mean, Highland Reel didn't run his best probably at the breed. I mean, I just don't think that he's like a great horse even at 1.25 miles. I think that the way I look at it is West Coast at 1.25 miles on dirt is better than Talismanic at 1.5 miles on turf. So Talismanic is going to have to be better at 1.25 miles on dirt than he is in 1.5 miles on turf. And maybe you'll get the right price to find that out. But I hope he runs well. I mean, he's an admirable beast, and it would be great to see it with Forever Unbridled, another horse that I'm a fan of, and I think is probably a little underrated. May be able to even run faster. I mean, she does what she needs to do, but I just don't think she's quite good enough. I mean, the only horse And Gunnavera, I mean, has had a well-documented bruised foot, was probably not going to have a great chance anyway. His style flies right in the face of the way this track plays most of the time. So the one horse that I could imagine upsetting this race would be North America, who, obviously took advantage of the bias in the Al Maktoum Challenge Round 3, but he could do the same thing again, and it's not like that is his only race to recommend him. Since he was switched to dirt, he has run race after good race, and except for he didn't handle the mud at all in the Godolphin Mile last year, then, just draw a line through that. He's drawn inside, he's going to the front. If by the end of the card you feel like pace in the rail is really a good thing, I mean, have at it. He shouldn't have the quality to hold off West Coast, but he might be able to, and he certainly could run second. The other horse that probably will be overlooked, who could easily get into the top 2, 3 certainly, would be Bob Baffert's second horse, Mubtaij. He's probably not as good as last year, but his last race was decent over a tricky track at Santa Anita, and even though that was just March 10th, to look at the horse, you wouldn't think that it took anything out of him. He looks strong. He was really into exercising today, and I think he's going to be pretty seriously overlooked over a course he's obviously very familiar with.
Interesting angles there. Mark, looking at the horses that USA racing fans are familiar with, if it's a known speed bias at the time of the World Cup, it would seem like West Coast could just take the lead too if he wanted it, though I would imagine they'd prefer stalking tactics. Do you think if North America wants the lead and West Coast wants the lead, who gets the lead?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? Because Richard Mullen, who rides North America, he's a very, very good gate jockey, and he will gun North America out of there. And I've seen Richard Mullen several times this season, and if he sets his mind on wanting the lead, he tends to get the lead. But it could be that by doing that, he compromises his own chance of winning the race. I could see West Coast no further out than in the 2 path here. I think he's got more speed than the rest of the horses inside of him. Depending on how the track plays, be quite happy to see Javier Castellano just sit a stalking trip behind North America. It's interesting that Mark has touched on Mubtaij, because I've written a column on Timeform.com, which is available for people to read for free. They don't need an account to read that. And I tipped up Mubtaij as my each way play in the race. He's around 20-1 here at the moment. Now, he's got very good course form. He's a 4-time course winner. He's also run well in 2 World Cups. Admittedly, he may not be quite as good as he was last year, but he did get a wide trip last year, which compromised him somewhat. I think course form is quite important. I could easily see him running into the top 3, and he's probably the play for me at a price, although I'm struggling to see beyond West Coast bias or no bias. If North America gets the rail in the lead, even with a biased track, I think West Coast will probably have too much for him anyway.
And we know that whatever you bet in the race, hopefully for your sake, you'll be rooting for West Coast in that 16-1 Roy H. double. We are
absolutely
extremely close to out of time here. So we're going to skip questions, but I will say this. You guys, I know, are both very active on Twitter. I'll have you each give your Twitter handles. If folks want to hit us up subsequently, we can keep the conversation going on there. Mark, you first for Twitter handle.
Yeah, mine is at Mark_Milligan73. If anyone wants now to spell Milligan, it's Milligan73. Mark_Milligan73.
And you can also find Mark's work at the Timeform website. Of course, we always encourage people to check out the PPs on Timeform US. But if you're looking at the plenty of races, the Timeform US do not have that Timeform.com will. A lot of great information on there you're going to want to check out. Marcus, how can folks find you?
It's at DRF Hersh, Hersh. Simple as that.
Very simple, very straightforward. I want to thank both of you. Yeah. Oh, you go ahead, Marcus.
No, I was just going to say I'm always happy to engage people, especially if they mock me and tell me how stupid I am.
Who would do that? Who would do such a thing?
Everyone on Twitter, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I think I have to say, just from my point of view, Marcus's Twitter account is much more lively and interesting than mine. It has to be said.
Well,
That's unfortunate, I'm afraid.
Both good at interacting with the fans, and like I said, we'll keep the conversation going on there. Folks can find me at Looms Boldly on there. I want to thank both Mark and Marcus. I want to thank Robert Forbeck at DRF for putting this webinar together, and I want to thank producer Jake Luft for joining us today and making sure everything goes smoothly. That's all the time we have. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. You've been watching content produced by DRF.com.